Okay, let's start. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us after 3 years of the last World Data Forum in-person version. We're really happy that we could do this meeting and this joining up, because it's been a while since those times and we went through many changes. Of course, COVID was involved, but also we had so many data developments that we'd like to share and also to learn from. Okay, my name is Javier Carreras. I'm from Argentina originally. I'm an economist, but my background is related to statistics and also geoinformation. I studied a Master of Science at ITC in the Netherlands, and I'm really happy to be sort of hosting this, but we will host all together. The idea is that we feel, comfortable and acquainted with this. I guess that by the numbers we have of people registered will be around like 5,000 or more. That means that if we have 200 people right here, it will be almost like, doubling outside the attendance. And according to the figures we have, it's already 100 people that are registered for this event. So thank you very much for that. So now what I would like to share with you is the work that we have been doing with Francois that is related to a major work together with Paris 21 and the Swedish statistic. He is Francois Fontaine, and he will introduce himself and also show you which is the general background of what we are coming here to launch and to present. So the floor is yours.
Thank you, Javier. Welcome, everyone. My name is Francois Fontaine. I'm not a geospatial specialist. My background is in AgStat, so somehow Ag came with a very strong geospatial flavor from the very beginning. I'm currently the deputy head in Paris 21, which is a global partnership which puts different communities together to achieve better data for better lives for all. Some of you may have joined the session on financing of data systems this morning. That was us. So we put a broad network of different communities together: data producers, data users, donors, and technical partners. Within the data producers, there are actually many different communities, right? The big one voice in Paris 21 has always been the official statisticians, national statistical offices. We have the geospatial community as well, and we've seen these two communities really living in different worlds for many years. Since 10 years, there have been bridges built by the UN, by many of you here. Actually, last time we met in Dubai, there was the Geospatial Forum right at the same moment as this forum, and this was a really good opportunity to consolidate the bridges. We did an initiative from Paris 21, indeed, bringing different partners together, different experts on this geospatial official statistical integration. And we were very happy to launch this guide, which Javier kindly printed the front cover, which is available in English and in Spanish, and which is actually part of our NSDS package. So for the official statistic community, the NSDS is something which is pretty well known. It stands for National Strategies for the Development of Statistics. So these are the midterm planning. What are the key things which the official statistical community needs to make happen in the next 3-4 years to really build the capacity which is needed to produce numbers. For many years in Paris 21, we have heard, look, your NSDS guidelines are fine, but they're a bit geospatial blind. So we put together these different experts together to really put an emphasis on how national statistical offices should go about geospatial along the NSDS data cycle. So I have a few slides, and I'd like to share them with you.
We could share Francois' slides. It's probably the one with his name. Yeah. I think that one. Yeah.
You have the...
Yeah. Can we have, yeah, there we go.
Okay, this piece of art here shows the beauties of having official statistics talk to the geospatial data people. That's a map on the left, which Danny, the NSO of Colombia, used to do on poverty statistics. And in 6 months' time of a pilot project, we put them in touch with this World Data Lab people, data scientists, and unlocking siloed data, putting algorithms around different data sources. They managed to bring the granularity into population estimates and poverty numbers. You have the new map on the right, and this shows the value and the beauties of having these two communities work together. It's not a big deal. This was managed because Danny has quite a strong research capability and it can manage the risk of taking new methodologies and new approaches. But this was done on the space of 6 months, only remote support from World Data Lab. And this has been super useful for policymakers in Colombia to really address the challenges of the COVID-19 pandemics. So that's to remind everyone of the importance of having NSOs really take the geospatial community on board. Next slide, please. Okay, it's for me. So that's the guide, which is not yet another guide. It's meant to be understandable by the official statistics community. As I mentioned, it's part of the NSDS package. It goes with some very specific practical steps, which were the questions which really the chief statisticians asked us to unpack. We got the answers from the wealth of different experts. Should it be GeoCensos? Should it be Statistics Sweden, the UN expert group on geospatial and statistics integration? And we put a practical guide which has already been well received by the official statistical community. At times we hear chief statisticians complain that the geospatial community speaks its own language. It's too complex for them to understand. That's what the official statistical community lives on. That's the NSDS package. My take is if someone can make sense of this, which they make sense, then they can understand the geospatial language and the models and the approaches. So this would talk to this NSDS life cycle is something which is well established in the community. And what the guide actually does, and I think Javier will unpack this a bit more, is to provide different entries to really promote the dialogue between those mapping agencies and NSOs. Look at the institutional barriers. Sometimes, in countries, the mapping agencies, are part of the army. The NSO, works on a different world, and look at the different frameworks on both environments. I'll stop again by thanking the different experts who put this guide together. We took a risk because bridging communities is always a bit weird. You look stupid for the other community or ignorant for the other community. We really encourage feedback on this guide, and we want to have a living community around it. The next steps, as I mentioned, include using this guide. We have partnerships with the UN-ECLAC and UNECA in Africa to really embark the geospatial community in the midterm planning of statistical offices. So with this, thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your clear explanation and also the succinct words you shared with us. And after showing the general context of this guide, it was really challenging work to do because we never met face-to-face, as you may understand. We have been like 1 year already reviewing and reviewing, but already in a kind of general setting. We'll be hearing from Martin Brady, Mr. Martin Brady, as he asked specifically to be called out, but mostly because he has been part of both the side of official statistics from the Australian Bureau of Statistics and also from the geospatial part represented by the UNGIM, which has an expert group that was funded by him, but he was started in the group, and he made part of this expert group of integration of statistics and geospatial information. long acronym, but really useful because these people were expert more than me, at least, to decide a general framework. So the floor is yours, Martin. Thank you for being there. He's in Australia, 10 o'clock in the night probably, or more. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Javier. Can you hear me?
Sure.
Great. Awesome. Thank you. Yes, it's 11 o'clock at night here, but that's fine. It's probably better than flying to Europe. My name is Martin Brady, as Javier said. I'm from the Australian Bureau of Statistics. I've actually worked in both geospatial agencies and the statistical agencies, but I was asked on behalf of the current co-chairs of the UN Expert Group to present the work of the Expert Group. I co-chaired this group during the development of the Global Statistical Geospatial Framework, so I hope I'm an adequate substitute for the current chairs. So as Javier had said, the Expert Group is a collaboration between statistical and geospatial communities and reports to both the UNSC and the UN Group of Experts on Global Geospatial Information Management, which is the peak geospatial group for the United Nations. Next slide, thanks.
Next slide.
Okay, I'll have to get you to click through with me. So data for a better world is what most of us are here for. So if we click next, the UN SDGs has provided a framework to target effort and energy in the use of data for sustainable development. But COVID has disrupted this work and has caused many setbacks. It has given us many immediate challenges and pushing existing work off course. But the SDGs remain just as relevant in COVID-19 recovery and response as they ever were. When the SDGs were developed and launched in 2015, we asked, how do we bring data together to report on the SDG indicators? More importantly, how do we ensure more detailed and richer data about the SDGs is available to our leaders and communities to plan to achieve these goals so that our world indeed becomes a better place for all? The geospatial people would alter the SDG motto, if we click, to say, not only leave no one behind, but leave nowhere behind. So how do we bring data together so that no one nowhere gets left behind? As part of the answer to these questions centers around integrating data. This is critical to inform on complex interlinking issues and challenges. If we click next. One key realization that occurred early in the SDG process is that location plays a key role in the data integration process and to inform decision makers and policy makers. The statistical and geospatial community intuitively understood this problem and have come together to develop a framework to enable the integration of statistical and geospatial information. Next, thanks. As the SDGs were being finalised, the United Nations Statistical Commission and UNGGM formed the expert group. It was principally there to develop the global statistical geospatial framework that would address some of the location integration challenges. The expert group worked hard on this for a number of years, and the GSGF was endorsed as a global framework by GGM in 2019 and the Statistical Commission in 2020. At the heart, the GSGF supports data integration by ensuring socioeconomic data is spatially enabled using consistent methods. It also documents pathways that enables integration across information domains using a location as the key. Through the expert group and partnerships around the world, the GSGF is now being adopted in countries and regions globally. It has also been translated into Chinese, French, and Spanish. Next screen. The 5 principles at the heart of the global framework are described in detail in the paper on the expert group's wiki page, but I'll quickly go through them here. Firstly is to use fundamental geospatial data and infrastructure and geocoding to spatially enabled data. We do this within a geocoded unit. We treat the geocoded unit record data in a data management environment. This is to protect the data and privacy. We use common geographies and the dissemination of statistics to ensure the data is comparable and can be analysed effectively. We seek and work hard to improve the interoperability between statistical and geospatial, and this is referred to previously with simple matters such as trying to harmonise terminology or have better understanding of terminology across groups. We also, at its pinnacle, and something we should always be trying to do, is make data more accessible and usable, particularly for geospatially enabled statistics. Go to the next slide. The GSGF details a more complete description of the broader GSGF, and the paper describes this. It provides a full end-to-end description of the inputs, the 5 principles, and 4 key overarching elements. The paper that describes the framework also identifies pathways for the integration of data and mechanisms to create impact from the resulting information. Through the application of the 5 principles and supporting key elements, the GSGF permits the production of harmonised and standardised geospatial-enabled statistical data. The resulting data can then be integrated with statistical, geospatial and other information to inform and facilitate data-driven decision-making. Go to the next slide. To wrap up, I'll talk a little bit about the forthcoming work of the expert group to give you a sense of where it's going and the work that's occurring. The GSGF is now in place to ensure more location-based data is available and can inform decision makers. In order to ensure this occurs, the expert group is working hard to ensure that it can be used to transform statistical activities across the world. The expert group is supporting GSGF implementation activities and its further development. It is also making GSGF-related information openly available on its wiki. You just need to search UN GSGF and you will find links to the information material. The current focus areas of the expert group are with national and regional implementations and adaptations. These are occurring already in Europe, Africa, and Latin America strongly. There's also national examples and experience being documented and being put on the wiki. The expert groups are also producing guidance material and good practice documentations, and it's focusing at the moment on geocoding, common geographies, and interoperability matters. There's also some very good work on managing confidentiality and privacy occurring, which will be published soon. In terms of capacity development, there's initial assessment of requirement and needs, and this information is feeding into coordination of regional and national bodies. The expert group has also worked hard to connect and collaborate on a number of other initiatives, including a very good example being launched today as the Paris 21 Guide. More recently as well, there has been a geospatial view of the generic statistical business process model, which is work led by UNEC and under HLG MOS. That produced some really excellent documentation material around the GSBPM, which many NSOs understand well. Again, I would encourage you to engage with the GSGF and the information that's being put on the expert group wiki. Again, just search UN GSGF. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much for being really stick to the timing we were speaking about. And if you allow us to change to the other slides, the one with my name, Javier Carreras, we will be seeing to the specifics of the guide and more details about the steps we were speaking about. More properly, what Martin Brady was showing before is that we had a general spectrum of dealings and also working out of agreements from different areas and different communities, as Francois was mentioning, that it's really difficult to work out. We are part of the operational guys that put hands on to write actually what should be strategically dealt for national statistical offices and national geographic information agencies as well. This is an important dialogue we need to have at the NSS level. And these are the objectives in this slide. And basically, it's about providing context and also introducing this great framework, which was already explained by Martin. I won't go further on that. And also identifying and exploring basically the step for this implementation, right? Because we all know that these big frameworks are really important and they're based on agreements of countries and expert and data communities and statistical communities, but we don't know that this need, or at least we don't that much, how to get it down to earth. So as part of civil society and also as an expert in the topic, I thought it was a good idea to link those things. And that's why Paris 21 agreed that we could do it together. But it was their idea mostly. Okay, can we go to the next slide? Basically, I will be showing the next presentation regarding What are the steps? Already Francois went to this. It's 8 steps, and we'll be resuming them, abstracting them in 4 steps, because, people generally hardly remember about 3 steps. So I guess it's too many steps to speak about, and we'll be briefing around this and abstracting. But basically, it's getting the right organizations into the table to discuss and share data, assessing, and securing the needed people from the different agencies, such as National Geographic, but also the National Statistical Offices. And also, after that, securing the technical infrastructure needed to deal with all this human side of the thing. But this is totally coincidental with what already Martin was thinking about. Finally, or next step mostly, is addressing this geocoded infrastructure, so to find geocoding about how to get the access for all the scales needed, not only national ones, just typical national statistical offices, and that's great, but we need also the regional ones, or provincial ones, or statewide ones, and also the local ones. So that's the very reason of this. After that, we need to set a basic framework. After that, we need to decide the management environment. We'll go to details after this, and define the goals of dissemination and find interoperability. Let's see in some detail this objective we're speaking about. Basically, it's speaking to strategical levels. We need to facilitate implementation mostly. Although we are speaking at the strategical level, we try to facilitate something on hand, right? So first we explain the principles. You are all invited to check this at TA3.17 site. You'll find the Spanish version as well, and you find also, first of all, the English version, okay, for those countries that are non-Spanish speakers. But mostly because we are referring to low and middle income countries that are from also the Saxon and the Commonwealth outreach. So that's why we have these 2 versions, but we are going forward. And we have also processes considered, we have procedures, we have requirements, and that's already on the management reel. And finally, we go to the 5th chapter, which is the step-by-step guidance, which is those steps that I was mentioning before. And we should mention that there's a wall that we guide strategic people at the national levels, because these are the guys that will be sharing the data toward and together with the national statistical the National Statistical System, which is basically the core of the target of the audience and the readership that TA3.17 is always speaking to. So after that, let's see the same model that Martin was speaking about, but this is more oriented to, facilitating the understanding from the input, from the output, and also from the different levels, but not necessary steps of engagement from the principles that the UN GIM produced with the agreement of the different partners. This is basic geospatial infrastructure and the geocoding unit, or let's say linkaging statistic toward geospatial data, the common geographies, which is really important when you don't have the same local names for the same areas, you see. Usually national statistical offices use these administrative units that are not necessarily the ones that the geographical agency uses. And that's the deal of this level of the pyramid that is a principle. And also the statistical geospatial interoperability, and finally the accessibility of those data and usability by the users. This doesn't mean that you have to have everything at the same time. Probably you could start by the last step and then go back to the others. Sorry, I didn't mean step, I meant principle. The last principle, and then you go back to the other principles. And you could start with the geocoded unit or have something around that. What we thought is that we should think in those countries that are lower middle income and that need to be guided around that. And those were the 8 steps we were speaking about. A general content of this that we lasted already 1 year reviewing it together with Statistics Sweden, which was also the partner or the supporter through Jerker Mostrom, but also from other people that we work for, and we produce the guide. You can see the sign there, the brand, right? The name, basically. And we elaborated over global web frameworks. We went several times through this. The contents were developed on the base of annotated guidelines. That is important because that came from the expert group, and we follow up on what others. We stand on the shoulders of giants, you know, these guys that are agreeing. They were working together with this guide, and the methodology approach was a peer review approach, was really nurturing and really understanding of all the positions, including ours that is from civil society. Finally, section 5 is more important. If we go to the link I will show you next, basically it's TA3.17.org/geospatial, you'll find that the whole guide is there, and you can download right there. And maybe Sina can copy it to the question and answer section for the audience outside this room, which they are close to us. So basically, those are the sections, and also the reference that these sections have a part that are showing different case studies from different countries. And there you find the countries is Mauritius, United States, but also Finland, but also Colombia, as I was speaking, Namibia, Paraguay. And there's a growing thirst, I must say, for new case studies. So if you like to join us, if you like to share links over the live and the virtual audience, it'd be great that we could find more cases, and you're totally invited to show your own cases, because you're really looking forward to keep on developing this guide and making it more wealthier, and try to put more hands on it, like, develop a proper assessment, proper self-assessment, right? We'll see that later. Oh, just 1 minute, not so later. And the guide also includes this listing of key concepts in case we don't speak about the same. This is basically to build consensus among the national statistical system, right? Because there are so many different stakeholders. This is the abstracting, as I said. It's 4, let's say, groups of steps that are relating. The first one, this is a clockwise diagram, right? So you start by the human factor, putting together the right people, and also finding the right people at the agencies. And then after that, we find the proper data and the proper technology. After that, the framework for geographies and design the data management environment. That's really important, because it's not only about knowing about the data, but also knowing the data from the people with a certain ambience and dealing of the data. You can find more details in the guide. And finally, to give the proper dissemination strategy, which is really crucial here, and also to give interoperability to those specific users that might use the data in their own ways. This is really important, and it has not much been done, besides the known cases, but we need to address this together. So that's the point of keeping up the development. And that's it. I wanted to explain you a general example, but I guess Amelie and also Brady would like to provide their input. And basically what we try to say here is that we need to sit all the stakeholders at the table, not only the national statistical system, led by the national statistical offices that are already running their censuses and probably preparing their census cartography, but also the collaboration and the meeting with the national geographical information agencies that are, generally speaking, in Latin America, for instance, the national geographic institutions, for instance, they all merged and upgraded from military, and now they are all national, and all institutions related to geospatial data and registers. And to give a general view about this, it is important to find the right cohesion and the right setting for all the involved actors, and build one by one from those steps that we were explaining before. So with no further ado, well, this is an example for Honduras, where we found a certain characteristics of the actors and this related interest and power. You can check more in the guide, of course, in English and in Spanish, okay, for our sponsors, of course. And yeah, finally, the lessons is that basically we already covered them, that we need more views, more relevant stakeholders. We shouldn't miss the contributions from other actors like civil society, grassroots, and low middle income countries. Those where the core civil society participation are, and this is very important. And the compilation of new cases, as we asked before, to finally produce a self-assessment guide that we will follow out soon. And we hope to find you not only in the next World Data Forum, but in other areas and you know, audiences. So now we're done, and with no further ado, thank you very much. And you go ahead, please, Emily, and also Prachi would be online. So if we could set the slides for them, it would be great. And I guess Emily will be leading Prachi, and Prachi will be, you know, responding from the other side. Prachi is in the other side of the world. She's in Toronto very early. It might be, I don't know, if we can open Prachi's microphone. She will be explaining out how she got very early and was here for us.
Thank you.
Same as Martin was dealing with. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Javier. Good day, everyone. Thank you for inviting us to this panel because as we've heard this morning in the plenary sessions or in the other rooms, and as you presented, it's really important to have standards, to have global agreement on this geospatial data. And it's important to have geospatial data, but if we are to request geographic information, this data needs to be available to the smallest geographic unit possible. And it needs also to be interoperable with other data systems. And you just mentioned it, Javier, and that's why Dr. Stepbystep and myself, we wanted to join this panel to give a real-life example on how this geospatial information can be actually used in real life, in social sector. So we are experts in education, so that's why we selected this sector. And also to show how this information becomes really crucial in emergency. Now, lucky, unlucky, we make our own assessment, but the COVID crisis has really been an opportunity to show how data production, data management, data use can be extremely useful to have responsive systems. And so we plan this from the education perspective. So we're all set. What, Javier, you did not mention, but I'm a demographer working at the UNESCO International Institute for Educational Planning, IIEP. Dr. Stepbystep is a professor at Western University in Canada, and we've teamed up to talk to you about microplanning, school mapping, geospatial data in education, however you call it. The purpose is threefold. So the first reason why we use geospatial data in education is to ensure better equality in the distribution of educational opportunities on a territory, either national or subnational level, doesn't matter. But we also we use this approach to ensure better adaptation of these educational opportunities for meeting the expectations of communities. So we talk a lot about the needs of the communities, but we better frame it as expectations of the communities regarding the education system. And the third reason is because we want to make sure that we can allocate the most efficiently possible the public resources, mostly public resources, but also the private ones, of course. And all this together makes education system more responsive. And so in education, we use, of course, education statistics, education data collected into regular processes, but matching these education data with school location, with household surveys, census, population census, looking at wealth, looking at linguistic group, looking at the crops around the schools, looking at the road networks allows us to really put all this together and make sure that we can make these learning opportunities available to everyone. And so building a viable education system requires using the most diverse data possible at the smallest geographical unit possible. And so what we've been doing at the IIEP, for example, these are a few examples, but it's looking at, for example, travel times to go to school. So how long are your children walking to go to school every day? Do they have the same learning experience if they walk 10 minutes or I don't know, 100. Exactly. And so we worked with the Ministry of Education in Jamaica to look at some isochrons on the left side of your screen. And now recently we modelized and estimated the school-age populations affected by the floods in Guli in Sudan just a few weeks ago. And so these are just examples to tell you how we can make sure that these data sets that are available can actually have real-life implications for ministries of education, for whole societies and communities. And so, by the way, the codes for all these tools and methodologies are on our GitHub, so IIEP Dev. You can find it really easily. We'll put it in the tweets. Now, this is another example looking at natural risks. We talk a lot about natural risks and the climate change. How do we modelize it to make sure that ministries of education can more easily bring data into the discussions on where to build new schools or how to maintain existing schools so that they can resist floods, earthquake, high winds, and so forth. And so the kind of motto that, let's say, inspire our work is really about these three things: local conditions, local constraints, and local solutions. And so building all this together with our very special situation of the last 2 years has allowed us to, value our, let's say, advocate for even more accurate, even more precise, and even more timely information, specifically regarding the COVID infections, and even more specifically so COVID infection in the school system. And the question really is how to take advantage of this localized information to not only see the impacts of COVID, so looking at the cases, but how to actually process this to actually try to mitigate these impacts. So how to design targeted policies or interventions at the right level so that we can make sure that we're as efficient as the data allows us to be. And so without further ado, I will leave the floor to Dr. Stepbystep, who will present some research, very recent research, especially drawing on this, the high potential of using geospatial data in education management and planning.
Thank you, Amélie. Hi, everyone. Bonjour. I'm joining you here from Toronto. I wish I were there. So I'm just going to start by showing the context and then showing you the practical application, implementation, and all the way through to how we can use these kinds of data for analysis. The education pandemic context here in Canada is quite varied. We have a decentralized federal system, and both the pandemic response and the education responses are really led by the provincial level. And all the provinces have different data systems, different reporting systems. So you can imagine that in terms of really trying to do a cross-national comparison, it's quite difficult. In Ontario, we've had the longest school closures across the rest of the country. We've had 26 weeks since up to June 2021. And we also have the largest education cohort across the country of roughly 2.1 million students, 94% of whom attend publicly financed schools. So that's important because the data gathering exercise is usually done at the provincial level, and there are different kinds of reporting mechanisms for public and private schools. There are data gaps on comprehensive and comparable data on the COVID scenario at the organizational level of outbreaks across sectors. So what I mean by that is it's very hard to get data at the organizational level on workplace, on retail, on in the medical sector, in the health sector. So it's hard to do a comparative analysis to really understand how schools are affected vis-a-vis other organizations. We also don't have data on school closures. We know the numbers of schools that are closed, but we don't know which ones or for how long. Yeah. We don't have data on private schools. infections and closures. We don't have comparable data on learning disparities, mental health and well-being, and access to services during the pandemic. And when I mean, and the ministry might have some of these, but these are not publicly available. Next slide, please. So what we did was, and this is as an independent project of mine, was to create a real-time, intuitive and easily consumable platform for public information and research. Because when this was happening last year, there was a lot of discourse around schools and school closures and whether or not they should be left open or not. And yet there really wasn't any way for people, researchers and the citizens, to really understand where the closures were, what was going on. So we created this platform using public official data, and we wanted to do two things. We wanted to look at equity variables, and we also wanted to map the closures at the same time. So we connected two different data sets, which were publicly available, one on school demographics and the other on school infections. And if you're interested, you could go to COVID-19schooldashboard.com. Our code and everything for the website is also available there. And you can see the red spots are concentrations of school closures. Next slide, please. If you go on the site, you can actually see what the demographic characteristics are of any affected school. So you can see if you were to hover over one of the bubbles, the size of the bubble tells you relative to other schools, roughly how many, exactly how many cumulative cases there were. And then if you were to hover on any one of those bubbles, it gives you a menu, as you can see, that white box with all the administrative data of the school. It includes the school, the name of the school, the city, the school board, the language of instruction, the enrollment, and then all of the equity variables that we could find, which were on household income, immigrant status of the students, the language, parental education. And really the point of this was to connect these data so that we could understand a little bit more about not only the number of infections per school, but also how that actually might affect the profile of the school differently, because we know from other research that the effects of COVID-19 school closures and infections are actually quite inequitable. They affect disadvantaged communities worse than others. So we want to be able to map that as a public information exercise, but afterwards we want to do analysis. So what kind of analysis can we do? So Amélie, next slide, please.
Yep. Would we be speeding a bit up?
Yeah.
Because
it's almost.
We'll have like 3 or 4 minutes.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's the last slide. Yeah. So what we did for this was we started to model the data at the end of the school year, and we looked for we wanted to ask the main question: what was the effect of socioeconomic factors on the cumulative incidence of student infections within and across areas? And we were able to use 4 different data sources. So we looked at, and these are all publicly available, these were active COVID-19 cases, demographics, and then within specific geographic areas. So in Canada, we have the postal code system. The first 3 characters of the postal code really identify a particular area that gives you a lot of interesting demographic variables. So we integrated that. And we also integrated a provincial level data set called the Marginalization Index, which has indicators on deprivation, on all sorts of, on ethnic concentration, on whether or not housing is secure. And we then combined all of this to actually do a multi-level model to understand the school level effects and the area level effects on whether or not that had higher instances in elementary school infections. And preliminary findings, and these are my last 2 points, was that the proportion of students from low-income households within a school was really a significant determinant of school-level infections within schools. And this we could, while the visualization helped us to see what was happening intuitively, by combining these different data sources and actually doing the model, we were able now to say that that is in fact one of our findings. The second is that actually this relationship was significant, but it was relatively weak. The bigger effects are really at the level of the areas. So schools that are concentrated in more marginalized areas relative to other schools tended to have more infections. Again, we could only do this by by visualizing, having an intuitive understanding, and then testing it by the model. What that means in terms of policy response is, in terms of really looking at recovery, what we would advocate on the basis of these results would be that schools that are in deprived neighborhoods should be given proportionately more resources for recovery. And then within those areas, schools that have higher proportions of students from low-income households should be targeted even further. So that is really the final point. If you have any other questions, you can feel free to contact either myself, I'm on social media or email, but it really is a very strong example of how we went from a problem where we didn't have any information to using data sources that were available, combining them in a way that isn't usual, and then actually being able to do an analysis as a result.
Thank you very much. Prachi, would you like to say a word?
No. I think this is also, I mean, between the lines, it really shows the power of publicly accessible data, and so we can have this discussion maybe later on.
No, we appreciate, and you can see that this is more the applied side of the data integration to statistics.
Voilà.
By the way, I really appreciate Prachi's contribution because it answers to a question we also have in Jova. I was going to say that if you'd like to send a question to Prachi, then you can do it through Jova. You can find it there by her name, Prachi Srivastava, right?
Yep.
So thank you very much for that. I felt like Ulysses in the pole of the ship of the Odyssey, like stuck and hidden to the mermaids, but we have to go on with the time. So with no further ado, and just forgive me, I didn't introduce you. That's
no
true.
Problem.
There's help for that, for presenters that only introduce.
No worries,
I'm
no
here
worries.
to introduce people. I'm so
Let's
sorry.
continue.
Okay.
Thank you,
But
Prachi.
Amélie Gagnon, also from UNESCO. I'm Prachi Srivastava from Western University. Thank you very much. Without further ado, we'll go with Javier Terán. Are we set with the slides for him? I mean, do you have slides? Okay, great. We'll have like short time for questions and answers, just taking consideration of that. And we'll prioritize someone that was included in the session but couldn't travel and couldn't get close, which is Romero Kelly Orlales. She has worked a lot for this, and she felt so frustrated for not being now included. But she will have her word also for us. She's already in the Zoom link. Okay?
Thank you, Martin. I'm following.
Okay. Martin was the other guy, but never mind. It's Javier. Okay. So,
should I go?
Yeah, Javier, Tocayo, the same like name as mine.
Okay.
Javier Terán from UNOCHA, a statistician.
Yes.
And you do the rest. Okay.
Thank you, Tocayo.
Thank you.
Thank you for the invitation, Francois. Thank you for the invitation. A pleasure to be here with all of you. Maybe just to congratulate you for the guide. I really found it very interesting, very practical, easy read. Maybe the Spanish version more than the English version, Tocayo. But nevertheless, I really invite you to take a look and explore it. It's very clear that through the guide, there is a lot of learning saying that linking data about people, buildings, infrastructure, health facilities with geographic location really gives a better perspective of issues that we are all interested. And one of the examples that I want to share with you is how we use statistical data with geospatial data in the humanitarian sector. So what you see here on this slide is a visualization that we have put together in OCHA with the Division of Operational Advocacy and the Center for Humanitarian Data to give an understanding of the status and the impact of the COVID pandemic in countries with humanitarian operations. So what you see here is a visualization that has been seen for a little more than 80,000 users and seen 100,000 times. And is it true that there is a lot of dashboard out there? There is a proliferation of dashboard. Everybody has come with a dashboard, and I have no doubt that they are beautiful. They are very nice. But humanitarians, they have a wide range of data needs. So for our sector, we have to have a lot of the different variables all together to understand the problem that we are trying to solve. So we assume that challenge, and we put this dashboard together that combines a little more than 60 different data sets from more than 20 data sources. So In this visualization, you can see data from cases and deaths from WHO, but also data about migration from IOM, data about refugees from the UNHCR, data about the schools closure from UNESCO, data about food conditions from WFP and IPC, data about financing as well, data about funding as well. So just to give you a more complete vision of what has been the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic in countries with humanitarian response. So what is the users that we are aiming this visualization? So there are three groups, basically. The first one is policymakers, top management people that are looking for a visualization to extract data in 1 second, but also is aimed at users that they want to do analysis, information management officers, analysts, and also the third group that we are aiming this visualization is for data scientists, people that they want to extract data behind this dashboard and use it for anticipated action, to model, to see how countries compare one to another. All the data that you see here reflected on this data visualization is on XDX, so you can easily go to the platform and download the data sets with the proper metadata. So I'm a statistician, so I believe on the power of metadata, how important is that to understand the data that we use, and of course, totally open for the geographers that they combine information. Yes. Something that is very clear also in that guide that I just want to really stress is that whenever you develop this kind of visualization or dashboard, you always have to talk to your users. Don't make assumptions that they will understand what you are putting on a dashboard. You know, that is kind of an easy mistake that you can always do. You have a very clear view of what the data is all about. Don't assume that your user will understand. So whenever you do these kind of things, try to talk to them, get feedback, and try to incorporate it in the dashboard that you realize. So just the final thing, just to say, even though this data visualization looks amazing and it's very beautiful, I cannot deny that, there are some gaps. There are gaps that we have in our sector that sometimes stop us to do our response. So I have found a lot of data gaps on the availability of health facilities, for instance. So that is super important for humanitarian response, but we have data gaps on the location of health facilities, data gaps on the location of education facilities, data gaps as well on GAM and SAM rates, or the global malnutrition. So if you happen to know where are those data sources, talk to us, because this is super important for our sector. And if there are members from national statistical offices as well interested to make your data available for the humanitarian sector, also please talk to us. I'm on Twitter, as the lady said.
At Human Data.
Exactly.
I use it usually.
Exactly.
So I guess we should wrap up, and we should give the floor to the audience, of course. The virtual one has written the questions, and we will answer them as soon as possible. One of those I already went through. I think there are two related to which is the real value of geospatial information. I think the session has spoken by itself, and we will pick up. I'm sorry to say this, but it's only two questions we may have time to answer, and we'll be also asking Rosemary. Would you like, please, to share the last question, Sina, or anyone would like to ask a question? We're taking questions, huh? This is open. Come ahead. Yeah, please. A lady here at the front. Would you introduce yourself? I'm sorry, I don't have that much information, but I know you're a well-known person.
Thank you for this interesting presentations. I'm Ahlam Al-Rusan, IT Director from Jordan, Department of Statistics. Maybe I have two parts of the question. First, about the presentation of the school data, the people or the students who affected by COVID. What the source of data? It was from Ministry of Health or from registers by school, and how you can trust this data. Yeah. The other side of my question is IT. If I want to ask about what the recommended tools of GIS that's recommended to use in all technologies that we want to develop in GIS, like COVID or anything else, because usually the governments now use ArcGIS, which is very expensive. So, and now we see many of the tools that's free or open source.
Open source.
But we didn't know what the difference is. The open source or the free is a completely same of the other or no. We can replace or we can exchange and make migration without effect of the level of the work. That's, thank you.
Well, thank you very much. Another question to pick up, I don't know, expert in the field or layman, those are especially welcome. I would define your question by basically the multi-layer of the sources of the data, but also the sustainability of having software, open software, to deal with these matters, which is really something we approach here, and we call it the sustainability of, the infrastructure. So, Amelie.
Yeah, no, perhaps I will let Frachi answer the question about the source of COVID cases in schools. And then perhaps I can just make a word on what we use as technological solutions.
Don't ask, just go ahead.
Okay, go. Prachi, maybe you start by sharing the data sources for the COVID cases.
Sure. So the data sources for COVID cases are reported from schools, directly from schools to the school board, and then the school board, which is the main governing body for schools, then reports it to the Ministry of Education, and the Ministry of Education released these data publicly as of September 2020. It's continuing to do so this year. So that's, and then on the equity data, well, on the school demographics data, those data are reported to schools, from schools to school boards, and then again to the Ministry of Education. The Ministry of Education reports those again, and they update those, I think it's every 3 months. So that's what we have. If you want data that are not available publicly, you can make a request for data to the ministry, and then they review the request and they see whether or not you can have it. But the data we used are all open and publicly available. If you go to the dashboard, there's a whole section there on data sources. The code is there, what sources we've used, everything is there. And also there's a whole explanation on how to use the data and what the significance is.
Sorry. We have someone online, which is Rosemary Okello. She's in Nairobi. Would you like to make a comment to us, Rosemary? I think she's unmuted. Yeah.
Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. I'm talking from Kenya. I wish I could have been there. And let me see if you can see my face. Okay. Yeah. Actually, what I wanted to, if I could have been around, was why the linking data and statistics and decision-making can make the vulnerable, especially women, become visible when it comes to decision-making. Many a times, statistics has always actually eluded women. Even when censuses are being done, they are not all part of it. And many a times, the numbers are not captured. But when decisions also are made, not proper statistics are used to showcase the status of women and the situation women are in. So we are looking at the guide with geospatial data integration in official statistics as actually a key milestone, an indicator on how, if it can be used with decision-making, can make women become visible. And I was going to show examples in a certain marginalized community in northern part of Kenya, how the use of statistics have been able to make the community women become visible to come to community issues and situations. So I really agree, and I kind of agree with every presentation that has been here, that geospatial data integration is critical for future development, and more importantly, for SDG as an indicators for SDG achievement. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rosemary. We are really happy to have you here. Sorry that things went like this. And we'll follow up with one question, if you don't mind, from the audience. Sina, may you read us, which is the question different from those we have answered from the HOBA platform? By the way, just an advertisement, but for the functioning of this forum, please make your questions there. If you don't care and you're shy as well, and you don't want to do it right now, it's not a problem. You can write it. We can answer you. and we'll be happy to have you dealing. Sina, go ahead, please.
Yes, please. Should I just read the top voted question in this case? Okay. So the question asked online was, what geospatial data do you wish you had at the beginning of the pandemic, i.e. which geospatial data streams do you think we should be investing in for the next one?
Okay, great question. I think I left you behind, and no one is to be left behind here. So you can answer, keep on answering the other one, but you could also answer this one.
Maybe.
That's a great one.
I think for the case of your team, your ministry, your agency, your company, whatever, we always try to, I mean, I guess the best technological solution to select is the one that really fits the purpose and fits your need and fits your expectations. And for us, at least, what we decided after trying several different products over the years is that we want as many planners and managers and ministries of education to be able to use geospatial data in a collaborative way, in a autonomous way. And so that's why we select almost exclusively, I would say, exclusively, I'm looking at Herman, my colleague, but we select exclusively free open source software. The reason for that is that, of course, there are costs for licenses and other products, but what we want is to be able to either work with or train a large group of professionals in a ministry, for example, where we mostly intervene, so that the knowledge and the capacity to use the data is not only on the shoulders of one or two people. And so we want as many civil servants at national or sub-national level to be empowered to use these data or to interpret the data. And so, you know, we all know we need to try something, we need to test it, we need to train, and we need to use it so that we become better at it. And so that's why we tend to focus on this one. We're lucky enough, we have a huge community in the geospatial data world and that we can rely on. If the functionality that we're looking for don't exist, we can create them. And perhaps I can segue into we just launched a campaign with UN mappers and OSM to actually map the road network in a specific region of Madagascar. So if you look on the Twitter of UN mappers, mine or IAP, you will see that you can just connect to Hot OSM and start mapping. And, you know, in the past, you know, in a ministry, you would say, oh, we don't have this data, or I don't know the right person to contact in another ministry, and it would stop there. But now it's not the case. We can actually connect with the colleagues. There are these forums that really bring people together, and it's also possible to generate the data that doesn't exist in a really fast, quick fashion. And so I really don't know. I think we can have these long discussions about open data, open access, public versus, bon, en tout cas, I don't know. I think we learn from experience, that's for sure. So about future data needs, I really don't want to make a statement.
We know what you mean.
But what we know is that when data is available, we can definitely use it for social good. And so I guess this is the biggest lesson for this year, at least for me.
Yeah,
maybe
that's an open discussion, I guess. And maybe Javier could follow up, also answering to the question Sina already read to us. And maybe answer, you know, really about just struggle between, you know, open data and more like official data, which shouldn't be a dilemma. In fact, they should be merging together. And finally, I would like Francois to wrap up, if you like, and we all go. And also Prachi and Martin, if he would like to say goodbye and good night, because he's on his trips right now. So, Javier, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Tocayo. I think the data needs have been evolving with this pandemic. At the beginning of last year, we were looking tremendously even for the cases and deaths of the COVID pandemic. The Center for Humanitarian Data has a work stream that they have been working on predictive analytics to estimate the impact of the crisis in countries with humanitarian operations. So at that time, I remember how we were looking like crazy for data about cases in Afghanistan. It was very, very hard. And not only statistical data, but also geographical data, just to know the road network in Afghanistan, just to understand how the virus was traveling inside the country. But nowadays, what we are struggling also is to find disaggregated data about the vaccines, how the vaccines of the COVID-19 have been administered in countries with humanitarian operations is a big need that we have. So I would say that needs are evolving as the pandemic has been evolving, but I mean, as Amelie said, open data is a good solution for all these kind of things.
We need to finance it so that everyone can use it.
Exactly, exactly.
Okay, good points. So after going to Francois, would Martin like to put his own seed on this? Or maybe he's not online. Are you? I'm Prachi.
No, I'm still awake.
Okay, great.
I'm still here and awake.
Okay,
I just thank you for the discussion today. It's always interesting to hear the different perspectives and the need for geospatial information and statistics to come together to answer important policy problems. I really like the education example. It's a really great classic but really contemporary example of how geospatial and statistical information could be brought together to inform policy. So really good.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you very much. Please, Prachi, you have 1 minute to wrap up your own contribution, which has been already rich and really nurturing for us.
No, thank you very much. I think the point around that Rosemary made around making visible communities that are otherwise invisible, that was really the point of the dashboard. I mean, the general purpose was let's just see what's happening, but the real value added was to add the equity analysis, to add the equity indicators, not just telling you how many cases per school, but break down the cases, and also then to understand the demographics of that impact, because that we know is going to be a very long road for recovery. And we can now start using those data in a way to actually argue for pro-equity approaches. So that, I think, is really the key point in terms of how to use data in a more powerful way.
Yeah, I guess, Prachi, what you're saying is also that we are not only finding, income stability, income equity, but also territorial equity for people. So to answer those questions that were life-saving, like, where do we find the test center? Where do we find the vaccination center? Where do we find the schools for our children to go? Are they going to be open? Where are they going to be? So I guess it's a new dimension, mostly from the geospatial side, but needs to be discussed also within the statistical community and the national statistical system. So last but not least, Francois will wrap up the general idea. I guess you have many ideas to share with us. So the floor is yours and the session.
Thank you, Javier. Well, thanks everyone for the amazing examples we've seen. I think, I remembered the Microsoft opening speech with trust, openness, and skills. And, we had it on screen, really amazing examples of what you can do with open data, with interoperable data. From Paris 21, we really see the involvement of the NSO as a game changer for trusted data. We want eventually this data to be transformative, to be used by policymakers, in capital cities, on the ground, in decentralized governments. So we really see the NSO as really a game changer here. And for this to happen, we need skills in NSOs. And this requires a bit of financing, all these amazing capabilities on AI and on analytics, making this data talk to different users. Needs investment, and NSOs, really need some support of the community to make it happen. So thanks again for sharing all these perspectives. We are happy to bring this guide to help to some limited. We have some good hope that it can help some NSOs, and we're excited to implement them jointly with some of the partners here in the months to come and in the years to come. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, and if you allow me, I would like to applaud your patience and your persistence. So thank you very much, and also for the live audience. They've been there and they are more than us. So thank you very much for your time and for attending. See you next time.
Thank you so much.
Welcome.